Hey there, my friends. It's the first week of May 2026. That means it's time for the monthly Cape Coral real estate market update video. I do one of these every single month, and we're really going to dive into the statistics of the Cape Coral real estate market. I'm going to do things a little bit different this particular month. Instead of giving you the full report that's an hour and a half plus long all in one video, I'm going to divide this up into 3 different videos that I've posted at the same time there on my channel. I've put links down to the other categories in the video description of this video. And so what we're going to talk about on this video today is mainly the waterfront real estate here in the city of Cape Coral. We're going to cover the categories of Gulf access single family homes. So we're going to look at the statistics in that, and they've been on fire so far this year. I can't wait to share that with you. And then also we're going to take a look at freshwater canal and lake homes in this video. And all 3 of these videos are going to have some general advice for current buyers in the Cape Coral real estate market, as well as some advice for current sellers in the Cape Coral real estate market. The video chapters are there in the timeline if you like to skip ahead to certain categories or something like that. But with all that out of the way, let's jump right into it. We're going to, again, talk about the stats that just came in from April. We'll compare that to the last couple of years and kind of get a feel for where we're at as a real estate market right now, as well as where we're heading. And then we'll wrap things up here at the end of this video with just a summary over the entire real estate market here in the city of Cape Coral. Let's get started. All right, we're going to start off with Gulf access single-family homes in the city of Cape Coral. We're very well known for Gulf access real estate here in the city of Cape Coral. We've got over 400 miles of canals. Most of those are Gulf access canals with access out to open water. So you can have your boat behind your house. You can have all those wonderful waterfront things that we love here in Southwest Florida. And Gulf access has been doing absolutely fantastic this particular season. We've seen just a tremendous number of sales so far. The demand is way up from last year, and let's get right into it. Let's start off with the total number of monthly sales. Here is the chart that goes back to January of 2024 of the total number of monthly Gulf access home sales in the city of Cape Coral. And we hit a high point for this chart last month in April. We sold 111 Gulf access single family homes in the city of Cape Coral last month. That's up from March's number of 101. But you can tell, I mean, this category is very much a seasonal category. We sell the vast majority of the properties in the first 6 months of the year versus the last 6 months, as our seasonal and retired folks are down here spending the winter and spring in the city of Cape Coral. So we see a lot more of our sales in these first 6 months. And really March, April, May tend to be our biggest month for Gulf access, very much kind of like condos. Condos are a very seasonal product as well. But let's compare this to the last couple of years. You know, last April in 2025, we sold 92. Again, this past month, we sold 111. And you go back to April of 2024, we sold 105. But let's just look at the first 4 months of the year and compare that to the last few years. The first 4 months of 2023, we sold 319 Gulf access homes that year in the first 4 months. In the first 4 months of 2024, we sold 337. Demand took a big dip in 2025. The first 4 months of 2025, we only sold 287 Gulf access homes. But take a look at this. The first 4 months of this year so far, we've sold 385 Gulf access homes. That's more than any of the last 4 years. And on top of that, if you want to compare it to last year and you want to look at it like an increase in demand, we've sold 98 more properties in the first 4 months of this year compared to the first 4 months of last year. That represents a demand increase of 34.1%, over a third additional amount of demand this year versus last year. Gulf access has been in big demand. A lot of those sales have been cash sales. And so even in spite of there being 6.5% interest rates or something like that, a lot of the folks, you know, the equities markets have been doing pretty well. The retirees, they're looking at that big dollar amount sitting in their bank account right now, and they're saying, hey, let's go get a Gulf access home down in Cape Coral. And so we're seeing a lot of those cash sales. I think almost about 40% of the sales that we've seen have been cash sales for Gulf access homes, maybe up a little bit more than that. I haven't checked this past month. But extraordinary bump in demand this year compared to the last few years, really, but especially compared to the last year. They're up 34.1%, and that's pretty darn remarkable. But let's look at the median prices for this. Now, we don't have big sample size every month, so you're only talking on average maybe 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 properties a month. So obviously your median price is going to kind of jump up and down a little bit, so you have to kind of average some things out, which we'll do here in a second. But let's just take a look at the median price chart, the monthly median price chart for Gulf access homes. The median price for Gulf Access homes in the city of Cape Coral last month was $755,000. That's down ever so slightly from March's median price of $770, but again, we're going to fluctuate up and down quite a bit. And I think it's important to kind of look back the last couple of years and average some things out. But just April of last year, the median price was $719,500. April of 2024, the median price was all the way up at $835. But let's take the first 4 months of each year again and average those four median prices out. The first 4 months of 2024, if you averaged all those median prices for those first 4 months, you would get a average price of $810,000. The first 4 months of 2025, that price came to $742,375. First 4 months of this year, it comes out to $736,000. So I think that's a little bit more accurate gauge. Those numbers right there are a little bit more accurate gauge as to where the market is right now. And if you compare those numbers together, we've been pretty flat over the last 12 months. We're down about $6,375 only from the first 4 months of last year, and that represents a decrease in average price of about a little bit under 1%, 0.9%. So nothing terribly significant over the last 12 months. If you go back 24 months and compare our $736,000 to that $810,000 2 years ago, we're down about $74,000. So that's about a 9.1% decrease from the first 4 months of 2024. And I think that's a little bit more of an accurate gauge. The high point was certainly back in 2022 when these median prices were a little bit higher than that. And so we've certainly corrected more as a market since 2022. We've corrected more in this category than 9.1%. But I think it's a broader sign that this particular category, especially with the spike in demand, has started to flatten out in terms of the pricing, especially over the last 8 or 9 months. We've seen pricing flatten out overall, and the inventory has been coming down tremendously. And let's take a look at that next. So again, these are the total number of active properties that were on the market at one point or another. So some of these properties came off the market, they sold, they expired, the listings were terminated and taken off completely. Doesn't mean there are this many properties available right now. This just means there were this many properties on the market at one point or another during the month. So here's the chart for the monthly number of active listings going back to January 2024, and inventory has started to come down already from where we tipped out this season. As you can tell on this chart, we always get that seasonal increase. As we get into December and January, usually the inventory numbers come up, especially in a category like this where we sell a lot more properties in the first 6 months of the year. A lot more people are putting their property on the market in anticipation of that busier buying season in the first and second quarter of the year every year. So no matter what the market's doing, we always get an inventory spike as we are heading into the first few months of the year. And that spike did not really materialize as much at all this year. We got a little bit of an increase, as you can tell, but not much at all. So the total number of actives on the market last month were 764 properties. That's down from March's number of 793. But let's compare that the last couple of years, because in April of 2025, last year, there were almost 1,100 properties on the market, 1,098 properties on the market back then. So we've taken a net number of Gulf Access homes off the market of 334, and that represents a decline in inventory in the last 12 months of about 30.4%, over 30%. So again, demand's up, above 34%. Inventory's down over 30%. That's pretty remarkable, and you can't keep that. You can't keep those trends up without pricing being affected eventually. So, tremendous amount of inventory taken off the market, and even if you compare it to 2 years ago when the inventory wasn't necessarily as high, at least compared to 2025, April 2024 there were 886 properties. So we've still taken 122 net properties off the market since April of 2024. That represents a decline of 13.8%. from 2 years ago. And again, especially in this category, we're always going to see inventory drop off as we get into the slower summer months. And in 2024, that drop from the high point of the season to the middle of summer was 21%. Last year, from the high point of the season to the middle of summer and the slow season, it dropped off 35%. So let's just say we only get 20%. We only get a 20% summer drop in inventory this year. That'll put us around 640 properties. That'll be the lowest we've seen on the market since 2023, and I think it's one more huge signal that this particular market cycle, especially for Gulf access single-family homes, is flattening out. The pricing has been basically flat over the last 12 months. It's only come down less than 1%, and with the total number of inventory continuing to come off the market, and we're anticipating it drops off even more significantly as we get into the slower months of the year. Especially if demand stays fairly high, at least compared to most summers. If demand stays pretty high this summer, we're going to turn the Gulf access real estate market around quicker than maybe any other category with the way the trends are going. But that wraps things up for Gulf access single family home real estate. Let's take a look, because I don't always include these, but let's really take a deep dive into the freshwater home market. I really love our freshwater canal and lake properties here in the city of Cape Coral. I think they are a tremendous opportunity for folks that are looking to get into waterfront real estate at a significantly lower cost than the Gulf access homes. So let's take a look and see what the freshwater canal system homes are doing right now in the city of Cape Coral. All right, so let's talk about the other type of waterfront real estate that we have here in the city of Cape Coral. As I mentioned during the Gulf access segment, we've got over 400 miles of canals and waterways here in the city of Cape Coral, and a good chunk of those are not Gulf access. They're freshwater canal systems, so you can't get out to the open Gulf, but you can still boat, you can jet ski, you can kayak, you can have paddle boards and pontoon boats and all those fun things in those freshwater systems, and they're connected to a lot of different little lakes and things like that. You can go fishing, you can do all that fun stuff in the freshwater canal systems. You just can't get out to the open Gulf, and as a result, the pricing on these freshwater homes are consistently quite a bit less than their Gulf access counterparts, and most of them aren't in that AE flood zone as well. So you can still have that waterfront real estate, waterfront lifestyle, but at a much lower cost, and you don't have to worry about that flood insurance in most cases. So I really love freshwater properties, and we're really seeing a huge increase in activity on the freshwater homes in terms of sales numbers compared to the last few years. But let's start off by looking at the total number of freshwater home sales that we saw this last month. Here's the chart for the total monthly number of sales going back to January 2024, and the high point on this chart is April of 2026, last month. Sold the most properties that we've sold on this chart. We sold 87 properties in April of 2026, and that's up from March's number of 84, and March was a really great month for freshwater canal homes as well. So we're seeing a big jump in terms of the number of sales this year compared to the last few years. And let's just compare these first 4 months of this year compared to the last few years. In the first 4 months of 2023, we sold 179 freshwater homes. In the first 4 months of 2024, we sold 195, so it jumped up from 23 to 24. In the first 4 months of 2025, remember, Gulf access home sales went down from 24 to 25. Freshwater homes went from 195 in the first 4 months of 2024 to 213 in the first 4 months of 2025. And the first 4 months of this year so far, we've sold 271 freshwater homes. The demand has increased every year in the last 4 years. And if you just take it back and compare it to last year, if you want to look at it like an increase in demand, we've sold 58 more properties this year than last year in the first 4 months. That represents an increase in demand of 27.2% for these freshwater homes. I think this is just an indication of people finding out that we have this product here, finding out what it costs, and finding out that you can still have a ton of that waterfront lifestyle, but you don't have to worry about that flood insurance, and you can get it on average. I think the average freshwater home is about $200,000 or $250,000 less than a similar Gulf access home on a Gulf access canal. So I love these freshwater homes. I love it. I think there's so much upside to them, and I think you can get just a ton of that great lifestyle at a much more reasonable cost, and certainly be on the water and yet not be in that AE flood zone, so you don't have to worry about that expensive flood insurance. But let's take a look at the pricing, because in spite of that demand going up, we've still seen some softening in pricing for these freshwater homes over the course of the last few years. So here's the monthly median price chart going back to January 2024 It spiked up a little bit last month. The median price for freshwater homes was $425,000. That's up from March's number of $388,500. But again, you're not talking about a huge sample size, so you really kind of have to average these out a little bit. Let's just take the last 2 Aprils. If you go back to April of 2024, or excuse me, April of 2025, the median price was $410. April of 2024, it was $490. But let's just take the average of the median prices for the first 4 months of the year in the last 3 years. First 4 months of the year this year, the median price averaged out at $410,000. First 4 months of last year, median price averaged out at $441,250. So that represents a decrease in average price of $31,250, or about a 7.1% price decline in the last 12 months. And if you look at the first 4 months of 2024, the average median price for those 4 months was $480,375. So again, almost $500,000. So we've come down a full $70,375, or about 14.7% in the last 24 months. But again, we've had a couple of spikes up and down, but overall, if you can take this chart back to June of last year, and we've been remarkably flat. We've been right around that $400,000 mark. We've kind of ticked up, mostly up above that, but a couple of months where we dipped a little bit below 400. But it's been, if you average them all out, it's been pretty remarkably close to between $400,000 and $410,000 for the last 8 or 9 or 10 months. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons that I suggest that this particular market cycle has been flattening out. Pricing hasn't gone up or down in this category and in most others for the last 8 or 9, 10 months. And we'll kind of have to see what we get into as we get into the summer months when the number of sales slow down. But I think we're going to be 6 or 8 months into pricing increase before we realize that we're in it. I don't think we're there quite yet. I'd like to see a few more consistent months where we're above that 410 amount, but in this particular category, but I think we're pretty darn close. Every sign points to this particular market cycle being flattened out at this point. So we've corrected quite a bit in all of the categories, and we've started to flatten out in the last 8 or 9 months. But let's look at the inventory for freshwater homes. Freshwater homes, these numbers are the total number of active listings that were on the market at some point or another. So this doesn't mean there are this many properties on the market. It means that some of these properties sold, some of these properties, the listings expired, they were terminated and taken off the market completely. So just keep that in mind. We're looking at these numbers. But total number of actives on the market at some point during April for freshwater single-family homes last month was 503. That's down ever so slightly from March's number of 510. But again, let's compare that to the last couple of years, because in April of 2025, 12 months ago, there were 591 properties on the market. So we've taken a net 88 off the market since then. That represents just under 15% decrease in overall inventory in just 12 months. And that even includes the seasonal spike that we got as we got into December and January and February, when listings in every category kind of tend to go up as we get into the main buying season of the first few months of the year. So in spite of that, we're still down about 15%. And even if you go back 2 years ago to April of 2024, we had 472 on the market that month. So we're still down a net 31, or about 6.6% from where we were 2 years ago. And I fully expect as we get into the summer months, this inventory will continue to drop down. We'll probably see at least 10, 15, maybe even 20% further reduction in inventory as we get all the way into the dead summer months, when we're not selling as many properties and a lot of these listings kind of get taken off the market. Now, some of those might come back when we get into next season, but the overall trend is inventory is decreasing, demand has been increasing. Eventually, that market's going to get to equilibrium and then start to go in the other direction, and we're going to be back to a seller's market. And I think right now we're at that trough where it's kind of balanced. We have a pretty balanced market right now, and I think that's why you're not seeing these median prices go up or down really in the last 8, 9, 10 months. And I think it's going to take a few more months before we realize whether or not we're in an increasing pattern. I think we need to get a few more of these properties off the market before we'll start to see that. But if anything, I think pricing will be pretty flat for the foreseeable future. And maybe it'll start to increase as we get into next season. I don't like to I don't like to forecast too much, but the trends are heading in the direction to where, and it's going to be inevitable that at some point we're going to start to see those prices start to go up in the other direction. And I know sellers have been waiting on that for a long, long time. But that wraps it up for Freshwater Homes. Let me finish this video with some advice if maybe you're a current buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market, as well as some advice if you're a current seller in the Cape Coral real estate market. All right, so if you're a current buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market, or you're anticipating being a buyer in this real estate market in the near future, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be paying attention to based on 20 years of being a full-time real estate broker here? I've seen every manner of real estate market in this business, in this location, and I can tell you just based on everything, I mean, you've been in the driver's seat as a buyer for a number of years right now, and we've seen pricing decrease even in the face of higher inflation numbers every year. You know, usually real estate kind of tends to keep up with inflation. So if you stack those inflation numbers on top of the price reductions that we've seen since 2022 when the market peaked out, I think we've corrected probably every bit of 30% in some categories, maybe even more than that in places like condos. But we're starting to see all of the trends indicate that we're in a flattening out. We've bottomed out in this particular market cycle. We've had 8 or 9 or 10 months of pricing that has been flat. It's bumped up and down a little bit, but there's been no clear trend for the last 8, 9, 10 months. Whereas in the years preceding that, especially in 2024 and 2025, for at least for the first half of the year of 2025, we had saw some consistent trends going in the downward direction on pricing. So pricing had some down pressure, and now we've seen inventory numbers, depending on the category, come down in excess of 30% just in the last 12 months. And we're heading into the time of year where those inventory numbers were going to be falling even more. And I was even talking to somebody the other day that was looking for a Gulf access home, and she called me and she said, you know what? I've been looking at these properties for the last 12 months, and it just seems like everything on the market has been picked over right now. I'm not seeing the number of available properties that I was seeing 12 months ago, and I think that's completely an indication of the inventory numbers coming down as much as they have. I mean, Gulf access has come down in excess of 30% from where it was 12 months ago, and on the other side of that, buying demand has been up in excess of 34% for Gulf access homes in the last for this year compared to last year. So you're seeing demand go up, you're seeing inventory come down. Those trends cannot continue without the market bottoming out and turning in the other direction. So pricing's been flat 8, 9, 10 months, and you know we're going to be 6 or 8 months into an increasing market before we fully realize that we are in an increasing market. So my advice to you would be, if you're looking in the near future, if you could do something in the next 6 months, I would definitely encourage you to do so. If you miss the bottom of the market, that's not really a huge deal. I don't anticipate pricing to go up very rapidly. I think if anything, it'll start to go up very gradually. And so if you miss that bottom of the market and you pay 2 or 3% more because you bought next year versus 6 months from now, I don't necessarily think you're in a bad position, because I think this overall area is extremely healthy. We're going to add another 100,000 residents between now and 2040 in the city of Cape Coral. And so that demand is going to always be there. People want the waterfront, they want the beautiful sunshine, they want the great weather in the winter down here. And so there's going to be consistent demand for people moving to this area for the foreseeable future. And I think the real estate market's future looks very, very bright in that regard. So don't worry about that too much if you're going to miss that bottom. But just be aware that we are experiencing the bottom right now, and pricing has been very, very flat. And as inventory continues to come off the market, you're going to have fewer properties to choose from out there, and eventually you're going to start to see these prices increase. We're already seeing, I couldn't tell you, I mean, in the last month, I would say I've been in 4 situations of multiple offer scenarios, either with my listings or with buyers that I'm representing, where we've gone to offer on a property and there's been 2 or 3 other offers on it. I haven't seen that really since 2023, maybe 2022. So it's there. The anecdotes are here, and they are backing up what the data suggests, which is this market's bottoming out, the inventory has come down, and eventually we're going to start to see a lot more competition for buyers out there, especially compared to where it was last year when you were kind of in the driver's seat and there was a million properties on the market. So my advice to you as a buyer is, if you're able to pull the trigger sooner than later, I think you're going to be in a better position. Don't let that keep you up at night. If you're planning on waiting 18 months or something like that, I still think if you catch it on the upside, you're going to be okay in the long term. And especially if you're intending to buy something and keep it for 5 or 6 years. I mean, just as strictly as an investment, it's going to be a great decision just because the total number of people that are coming down here, we're seeing more and more of them every year. So we got a great future here, and if I can help you with anything, if you are a buyer in the current Cape Coral real estate market, get a hold of me. Shoot me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email, whatever it takes. I always love hearing from your folks, but I can kind of take the information that you give me in terms of what you're looking for and the locations that you're looking for and all that kind of stuff, and kind of give you some advice in terms of what direction you need to be facing and kind of what to look out for. A lot of nuances in this real estate market, especially for buyers right now, so I'm happy to help you out. If I can help you with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Call, text, email me anytime. But that's my advice for buyers. You're looking, it's looking like the market's bottoming out right now. So your best time to buy is probably going to be in the next 6 months, maybe the next 8, 12 months. But eventually it's going to start going back up again, and there are going to be fewer properties on the market, and the pricing is going to be a little bit north of where it is right now. Okay, if you're a seller in the Cape Coral real estate market, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be paying attention to based on the 20 years that I've been a full-time real estate broker here in the city of Cape Coral? Well, I've seen all sorts of weird real estate markets, and it's certainly been a tough real estate market for sellers for the last few years, especially last year. Last year was just really, really tough to be a seller, especially in spring of 2025 when those inventory numbers were out of control. The buyer demand was down from 2024 and 2023. We've really turned that around, and if you're a seller in this real estate market, that's exactly what you want to see. And if you had asked me 6 months ago if we were going to have the inventory numbers and the increase in overall sales numbers that we're seeing right now, I probably wouldn't have believed it. It's been shockingly high, both on the in terms of the more number of properties that we're selling this year versus last year, and so much less inventory. So much inventory's come off the market in the last 12 months. So you've got light at the end of the tunnel as a seller, and that's the things that you want to see are happening right now. The inventory's coming down, demand is up, and as a result, pricing across almost all categories has been flat for 8 or 9 or 10 months. And so that really points to the sign that this particular market cycle is bottoming out, and in the absence of something crazy macroeconomically that happens and we go into a massive recession where people are getting laid off right and left and the stock market's gone down and all that kind of stuff, I think all signs point to this market recovery starting to happen, and we're going to turn back into a seller's market before too long. Right now we're pretty close to equilibrium, and that's why that pricing has kind of flattened out in the last 8 or 9 months. But I think we're going to be 6 or 8 months into this recovery before we realize that we're back into an increasing market. Just anecdotally, I'm seeing a lot of multiple offer situations. In the last month, I've seen 4 of them, both on the buyer side and the seller side, and I really hadn't seen any since maybe 2023. So signs like that are another indication that this particular market cycle is turning around. We've bottomed out, and eventually we're going to start to see those prices start to rise again as we get more of that inventory off the market. Still got a little bit of work to do on the inventory front, but I think a lot of that work is going to happen this summer as more and more of those properties come off the market, and especially if we have a really strong summer. Summer's traditionally the slow time of the year for this real estate market, but if we have a really strong summer compared to the last few summers, I think that market's going to turn around even quicker. So as a seller, if you're able to sell, if you need to sell right now, just make sure you're pricing your property right. You got to price that property right more than anything other. And if you do all the things right, you could end up with those multiple offer situations like I've seen in the last month or two. And but you got to price your property right. That property has to be looking tip top. But the good news is there are vastly fewer properties on the market now, depending on the category, than there were this time last year. So if you're a seller in the current real estate market, give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear about your property. You can send me that address, tell me a little bit about it, and I can give you kind of an idea of where you need to price that thing to sell it in the current Cape Coral real estate market. I don't think there's going to be a huge benefit to waiting until next year. If the pricing does start to go back up, I think it's going to be very, very gradual, unless we just have the inventory just falls off a cliff all of a sudden and the demand stays up. But I think it's going to be a very slow turnaround. So if you wait 12 months, maybe you get another 0.2% out of your property than you're getting this year, but it's not like it's going to be worth 10% more next year. If anything, the inventory numbers will continue to go down, and it'll be a better selling environment for sellers then. But it really just depends on what happens this summer and how much inventory comes off the market and then comes back starting at the beginning of next year. But all signs are pointing to this particular market cycle turning around, and that's great news for sellers. And you've kind of you've kind of had to cry yourself to sleep every night for the last few years if you are a seller in this real estate market, but things are looking up now. And if you are a seller in the near future, I would love to hear from you. Call, text, or email me anytime. But that's my advice for sellers. For the first time in a long time, things are starting to look pretty good, and there's some light at the end of this tunnel of this real estate market. So stay tuned. All right, let's wrap this up. Let's put a bow on it, give you a nice little summary of what's going on in the Cape Coral real estate market if you didn't want to wade through all of those nitty-gritty details. Well, what's happening in the real estate market right now is inventory is cratering. Demand is up significantly, especially in categories like Gulf access homes. We're seeing a ton more Gulf access home sales this year versus last year, and the inventory is significantly less than it was last year. Those two things together point to this particular market cycle turning around. The pricing across almost all categories has been very, very flat in the last 8 or 9 months. We haven't really seen a decrease or an increase in pricing since basically the middle of summer last year. And I think that's a really great sign for sellers that this particular market cycle is bottoming out. If you're a buyer in this Cape Coral real estate market, you're noticing that if you've been waiting for that bottom to occur, all signs are pointing to that we're at the bottom at this very moment, and we're probably going to get 6 or 8 months into this before we realize we're in an increasing market. So a lot depends on what happens this summer and in the remaining couple months here of our high season. If our demand continues to be strong into season, and we see a pretty significant decrease in inventory, as we probably will as we head into the slower summer months, I think that's going to help turn things around pretty quickly. And it's not like we're going to wait a year and the prices are going to be 10% more than they are now. If anything, it might be a point or 2% at the most, or it might still be flat heading into the later months of this particular year. So it's not something that's going to happen really quickly. If you're a buyer and you have to wait until this time next year to buy something, you're not going to be in that bad of a shape. If you're a seller and you're planning on waiting 12 months because you're going to get so much more money for your property, that's not really the case either. So the good news for sellers is there's a lot fewer properties on the market now, and you don't have to compete with as many sellers out there, but you still need to price your property right. You still have to have it looking tip top. And if you do all those things correctly, we're seeing for the first time in a long time multiple offer situations. I haven't seen stuff like that since like 2023, and I've been involved in 4 or 5 of those scenarios just in the last month or two. So we're starting to see things really indicate that we're making this turnaround here for this real estate market. But I think it's a very strong sign. We're still anticipating another 100,000 residents moving to the city of Cape Coral by 2040 here. So that long-term outlook for this particular area of Southwest Florida is very, very bright. So no matter if you are a buyer and you get in now or you get in 12 or 18 months from now, I think long-term you're going to be looking really, really good from an investment standpoint, because we're still one of the most affordable areas in South Florida. Certainly nothing compared to with the pricing and everything that's over there on the East Coast. I mean, especially the waterfront real estate over on the East Coast is just exorbitant. And even if you go down to Bonita Springs or Naples, waterfront real estate prices are crazy compared to what they are here. So you can still get a heck of a lot of property for a vastly less sum of money than you can in a lot of the other areas of Florida. And I think I think more and more people are finding that out every day, and which is why we're seeing such an influx of folks from other areas of the country moving here. But that pretty much wraps it up for the Cape Coral Real Estate Market Report for May of 2026. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, if you got something out of it, do me a favor, hit the like button on your way out. Make sure you're subscribed if you haven't subscribed. And if I can do anything for you, either buying or selling a property here anywhere in Southwest Florida, doesn't have to be Cape Coral, give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Contact information's right there on the screen. And remember, I do these videos every single month. These are in addition to the weekly videos I put out where I'm just giving you some really good, useful information. I try to create a lot of value for you folks because I know if I can do that, more of you will call me and allow me to help you navigate this complex real estate market, whether you are a buyer or a seller. But thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time, and I will see you on the next video in a few short days.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.